Hola, ¿qué tal? Bienvenidos a otro episodio, un nuevo episodio de Empodérate de Chicanos por la Causa, donde tenemos la oportunidad de abrir el espacio para compartir nuestras historias, compartir las experiencias de los líderes en nuestra comunidad, como la invitada que tenemos el día de hoy. ¿No es así, Fátima? Muy buenas tardes, ¿cómo estás?
Very good.
Fátima, I've been trying to get her to practice her Spanish more, aunque le traduce a su mamá. Yo no sé por qué cuando se viene a la oficina ya su español se queda en casa.
Ha cambiado mucho. Bilingüe, ser bilingüe se ha cambiado mucho. O sea, yo tengo, por ejemplo, yo siempre digo, bueno, fue mi primer idioma, puedo escribir, leer, hablar, pero mi prima, que tiene 15 años menor, tiene 15 años menor que ella, dice que es bilingüe también, pero eso quiere decir que cuando uno le habla en español, ella contesta en inglés.
Sí.
I'm like, that's me. Eso es totalmente algo diferente. Me dice, no, es lo mismo, soy bilingüe.
Yo lo entiendo.
Sí.
Yeah. Y hablando de eso, Monica Villalobos, presidenta y directora ejecutiva de la Cámara de Comercio de Arizona. La Cámara de Comercio Hispana de Arizona. Sí. Platícanos, vamos a empezar por el principio. Estamos platicando fuera de cámaras. El Lincoln Heights, ¿verdad? Es el área que te vio nacer.
Sí, el barrio de East LA, específicamente Lincoln Heights, y como unas 2 cuadras del famoso Hospital General, General Hospital, si se acuerdan de la novela, ¿verdad? En inglés, soap opera. No, y la verdad, ahora es un vecindario súper regentrified, ¿verdad? Entonces, se ha cambiado mucho, pero en ese tiempo, bueno, las cosas eran un poquito diferentes.
¿Verdad que sí? Estábamos hablando, definitivamente you needed to be fearless. And courage.
You did. And I tell people all the time, you had 2 choices then to get out of East LA. And it was either get arrested or get an education. And so you had to make those choices very early on in life. And a lot of it depended on the support system that you had. You know, I was lucky. I was in a multi-generational household. There were 8 people in one 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. It was like a postage stamp of a house, I always say. And it was very comfortable. And you don't know what you don't know. I think about poverty today, and I wouldn't say we were poor, but I think technically on the poverty scale, we were probably very poor. But again, you don't know what you don't know. Uno no solo sabe lo que he visto, ¿verdad?
Tu realidad.
Y para mí fue algo, para mí muy importante, and really the happiest time of my childhood, I think, as well.
Really? And so you were raised by un papá de Jalisco y tu mamá de Laredo en Los Ángeles.
I was born to a father from Jalisco and my mother from Laredo. I was raised by my mother.
By your mother, by a single mom.
By a single mom and my grandparents. And my aunts and my uncles and, anybody else who decided I needed discipline that particular week. So it takes a village. And for me, it was, growing up with a diversity of, culture and experience and traditions. I always laugh and I tell people that we always knew if you got home for dinner after the novela started, you were probably going to starve. Porque a las 6, mi abuela dijo, no, hasta aquí, y si no estabas ahí, no comiste, hasta mañana. Porque ya empezó la novela. Me acuerdo de I'm going to date myself here, but me acuerdo de Los Ricos también lloran.
Claro,
y eso fue
con Verónica
toda
Castro.
La familia, porque teníamos un televisor, ¿verdad? Y toda la familia, would sit there, and that's what you grow up watching. And the interesting thing, what I always take away from that is I learned my manners from the rich people in the novelas. So, cómo comer la comida, cuál tenedor, la servilleta, como todo de las novelas, porque nosotros no teníamos esa experiencia, ¿verdad? So it was the soap operas that really taught me about, manners, but it was also part of our culture. And so all of those things to me, I think it was a fascinating way to grow up.
It's a really good point. You're right.
That's the first time I hear something like that. Usually I've heard it before where people have learned, like my mom, she learned English watching shows in English, but I've never heard someone say that they learned etiquette from watching a show. That's so interesting. Yeah.
You stepped into a different world and welcome in the house. Like if there's absolutely nothing else but you're focused into that is your world. And right now you are distracted with so many other things right at the same time. So it's not like you're completely in there.
Right.
You get a little bit on social media for sure, but you still like running errands or doing something else while you're doing that as well.
Yeah.
How was it for you growing up by a single mom? Mi mamá fue viuda y creo que crecer con mis tíos y con mi abuelita, I just felt a lot more love and care than I didn't realize I'd had, obviously, until I created my own family. Pero creo que sí hay una diferencia de que ves la resiliencia, you figure it out. And I can see a lot of traits in the way you handle yourself. Like, I need to do this esta manera. Primero hago esto, luego lo otro, so I can get here.
Yeah. No, fui la consentida, o sea, la primera nieta, la primera sobrina, la primera y única hija por muchos años. Entonces sentí que tenía muchos padres, ¿verdad? No solamente era mi mamá, yo y mi mamá, no era algo solo, era algo con mucha variedad. Y como digo, when it came to discipline, it just depended who was there at a certain time, right? It could be my grandfather, it could be my grandmother, it could be my mother, it could be my aunt. And so you learn to adapt. And I think that is one of the things that Latinos do really, really well, right? Yes. Because of where we come from in our culture, we adapt to others really well. And that, to me, has been the single most important trait in business. Being able to be that flexible and that nimble allows you to respond to many different situations and not be rigid, right? And not just say, this is the only way it can be. So I agree with you.
Right? Or freeze.
Or freeze.
Being able to react.
Because those are the businesses that thrive. It's the ones that are able to adapt.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And, what we saw during the pandemic was exactly that. While minority-owned businesses and Latino-owned businesses are the fastest growing, we sometimes say, well, they're small and vulnerable, but they're also small and nimble. And so during the pandemic, when it took other large businesses, weeks, months, years to change their model, we saw our businesses thriving, 2-3 weeks, and they pivoted. If they had a restaurant that had been shut down, then immediately they started the side hustle, the catering business became the primary business, or the private label product became the primary business. And that ability to adapt saved our economy.
Tienes razón. Definitivamente, till this day, that's still the case where we see a lot of growth is those communities that are able to do just that. So walk us a little bit back about your career from marketing to la presidenta de la organización tan importante como es la Cámara de Hispana de Comercio.
Gracias. Bueno, no... I'd like to say that there was a plan, right? that I was like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And there was a plan, but it just wasn't this one, right? And so I like to say God's plan is always better than our plan, right? And once you accept that, I didn't know that for a very long time in my career. But as I said, to get out of East LA, I did my undergraduate at UCLA. I studied linguistics and psychology. I thought I would be a professor and go to, graduate school and then teach. And I remember my first interview, I went to go interview for a Hispanic ad agency, and they were the largest Hispanic ad agency in the country. And I thought I had blown the interview because the gentleman on the other side of the desk, the vice president, said, "Do you know what we do in advertising?" And I tried to come up with a very collegiate answer. Yes, you take a product and you position it and you like it. He said, no. We sell things to people they don't need. And I went, oh, okay, well, I blew that clearly, And so at that point, I felt like I had nothing to lose. And he said, do you have an ethical or moral dilemma with that? And I thought it was such an interesting question. And, like many times when I just speak, there's no... It's just, you get me stream of consciousness most of the time, right? And it comes right out of my mouth. And I said, listen, I'm living below the poverty line. I can't afford any ethical or moral dilemmas, And he said, you get the job, right? And so when I went into the field, I thought I wanted to change the image of Latinos in the media. I thought that was very achievable for one mocosita from East LA who had just gotten her degree, right? It turned out that there's an entire industry, and that dilemma continues today with representation. And so I learned a lot about advertising and what goes into that, and particularly the messaging, the words that we use, how we use them, and the language in which we use them. And so that to me was really important. And se dice, cuando uno quiere alcanzar la cabeza o la mente, habla en inglés, pero cuando uno quiere alcanzar el corazón, en español, ¿verdad? Entonces, para mí eso fue algo muy importante de eso. I went into marketing. I went client side. I worked for the Telmex Sprint joint venture. I lived in 5 states in 5 years. And I remember, just thinking, I want to continue to climb that corporate ladder as quickly as I can. And so the thought of a family or getting married or children, anything like that was so far from my brain. I ended up in New York for 10 years. I did get married. We had a family business of supermarkets. So people don't know this, but I can bag groceries better than most.
Mira.
Un talento.
That'd be a nice segment to have. See how many items you can bag in a minute.
Which ones, like, siempre estoy criticando when I go to the supermarket and they're like putting the eggs and then they put like the cans on top of the eggs and I'm like, So it was a great learning experience. So I went from, advertising to marketing to research and then to being a business owner. And that progression in my career, I felt really, built me up, I thought, for a very successful career that I had in New York. My stepfather came down with cancer. And from one day to the next, I had to leave my life in New York. They told me he had 3 months to live. He had lung cancer, stage 4. He had just retired. He and my mother were going to travel the world. And all of a sudden, they're like, you have 90 days.
Wow.
And so I dropped everything. Thank goodness I was in a position where I could do that. But I left everything. And I tell people all the time, I made 6 figures by the time I was 30, 7 figures by the time I was 35. And then it was all gone by the time I was 40, right? And so, but I would never give up that time. Ese tiempo con mi papá, mientras que se estaba muriendo, duró casi, 2 años, más de 2 años.
Wow.
Y nos habían dicho 3 meses.
3 meses.
Entonces, ese tiempo
That makes it harder, though, because you think you're going to get 3 months, and then anytime, like, it comes to that point, you're like, oh, wait. So it just keeps reopening the wound.
Right. And we were constantly on, is it going to be tonight? Is it going to be next month? And then you'd have really, really good days. And then you'd have really, really bad days. And we were going to chemo together and all of this. And I was very fortunate that at the time I was in research and I was able to get a job that was remote. And I was able to go to every chemotherapy appointment with him. Para ver él y mi mamá todavía con un cariño, and so it was beautiful to watch. And that to me is a really important thing. And so I got married and was pregnant. I was about 4 months pregnant when he passed away, but he saw the first ultrasound y lloró y dije, se enojó conmigo. I know. I thought he was mad at me because I was pregnant and I had this career. I don't know why I thought he was mad at me. It's just something you think of, like, and my mom said, no, he knows he's not going to meet the baby. And so that's why he's sad. And it just, it broke my heart. But, the baby ultimately, it gave my mom something more to live for because she was devastated when he died. But all of that to say that we ended up here in Arizona. And I felt like when I came to the chamber in 2012, I could finally use all my power for good. Everything I had learned over a 20-year career, I could now really put into the chamber, into a mission, into something that I could believe in. And so that's what I did. I worked for them for about 7 years. And then the position for president CEO came up in 2019, right before the pandemic. And the rest is history. I felt like the pandemic really showed us who we are. And to be perfectly honest, it was difficult. I've heard the president of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce describe it as chambers were the emergency rooms for business. And we really were. And I remember on March 16th, we had folks that told us, like, fire everybody because no one's ever coming back and you need to just shut down. And I was pretty insubordinate about it and said, no, I'm not going to do that. And then I had to figure out, how are we going to survive, right? And how are we going to be there for our members, more importantly? And so I think the pandemic really taught us who we are. It taught us the resiliency that we have. It taught us the importance that we have in the community and the importance of collaboration. We worked with the Black Chamber, the American Indian Chamber, the Asian Chamber. We started the Community Collaborative that now has 38 chambers that are chambers and organizations that are part of it. We found the Polish, Hungarian, German, Swedish, Filipino chambers. Y ahora trabajamos todos juntos para llevar los recursos, las herramientas a los negocios que lo necesitan más, ¿verdad? So I'm very proud of the work that the whole team has done. We have an amazing team. Todo el equipo cree en la misión, en la visión de la Cámara y entienden la importancia que nosotros tenemos en la comunidad. And that's something that you can't buy. Uno no puede pagar para eso, ¿verdad? Es algo así.
Because of the pandemic that like the chambers came more together?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's very beautiful.
Absolutely. I think we learned that we were stronger together. And I remember sharing with one of our corporate partners, and I said, I have this vision that I want all of us to work together. And this was before the pandemic. And they said, oh, too many egos. You'll never get that many egos in the same room. I said, okay. And so sure enough, I called the meeting and we were all there and we showed up, and that organization continues to exist today. We have a show called the Community Collaborative that we do every month as well, to talk about diversity and inclusion, how important that is. And I think that's a different mindset. And for me, most people know how much I love data. And as we become the new majority, we have to be better than the last majority. We have to be able to leverage our diversity, our differences. Those are strengths, they're not weaknesses.
Yeah.
And so, es una perspectiva un poquito diferente que antes.
Sí, tienes razón. Y definitivamente la visibilidad también del impacto y las contribuciones de los latinos en el estado y en el país, ¿verdad? Se ha hecho un esfuerzo a veces constante, no sé si consistente, en promoverlo. It's sometimes exhausting. I don't know for you how it's been because you spend a lot more time, but just seeing it from the outside and in different industries, how we continue to sit at the table, it has to justify and to prove ourselves and say, no, but our community is this, and that, and it's doing all of this. And I wonder through, ya sea datos o las 23 publicaciones que ya has hecho en tu carrera, is there anything in this particular aspect that you've seen that really that you think that is going to, that we're not seeing the difference or that we need to do more of?
No, muy buena pregunta, María Jesús. I think that ahora latinos son 30% del estado, 40% de Phoenix y más de 50% de las escuelas primarias, ¿verdad? El futuro es hispano, punto. The sooner we get okay with that as a state and understand that that's a strength, not a detriment, the better. I think what strikes me about the data most is seeing the wealth building that's going on, right? So Latinos do a really good job, I always say, of making money and of spending money, saving not so much. But what we're finding is that over the next 2 decades, 70% of new home ownership will be Latinos. 70%. So when you think about that, when you think about the workforce, between now and 2030, 78% of the workforce of new workers will be Latino millennials specifically. And so when you look at the data, and I say this all the time, if you're doing business in Arizona and frankly in the country, you are a Hispanic business. Those are just the demographics, right? That's the consumer base. And so it's also quickly becoming the supply chain as Latinos start businesses 2 to 3 times faster than other businesses. So to me, to be able to share that proudly, right? And to own our own narrative, that to me is the most important thing, because I think that sometimes we allow our narrative to be told for us by the media, by crazy politicians. We won't name names. But I think it's really important.
We all know them.
Everybody knows exactly who they are. But I think it's important to understand that, nosotros necesitamos contar nuestra historia y no dejar a otra gente contar esa historia, porque yo creo que es importante que nosotros estamos involucrados en cómo la perspectiva no solamente de latinos, pero de la economía, de educación, de viviendas, todo eso, del clima. Todo eso es importante porque nosotros somos el futuro. Nosotros vamos a ver, nos va a afectar más a nuestra comunidad simplemente por la población, ¿verdad? Entonces tenemos que ser, no solamente tener parte en esa conversación, pero ser líderes de esa conversación. And then what you said earlier about, we have a seat at the table, I always say, it's good to have a seat at the table, but if you're bound and gagged,
there's no
point to it. So get up from that table, walk away, and set your own table. We're fully, there's a wonderful meme that I love. It's more about women, but it says, I know exactly what I bring to the table, and I'm not afraid to sit alone. And I think all of us can really own that, right? And stop accepting crumbs. But we have to demand more.
Tienes mucha razón. And you do that to different aspects, no? And advocacy, it's one that I see that more through your leadership that's being more visible, I think. Desde comisiones with the White House hasta presentaciones en DC with national conventions and with commerce ways or press conferences at the legislature. ¿Por qué eso toma un papel tan importante en el área que mucha gente no lo mirarían como es la economía y los negocios?
Yo creo que también nosotros tenemos que unir nuestra voz. Entonces, para mí, poder representar es un honor, ¿verdad? Porque nosotros estamos trabajando con nuestros negocios, con la población, con los empresarios que están ayudando la economía. Entonces, cuando hay políticos que les gusta decir que nosotros quitamos de la economía, para mí me mortifica mucho, me da coraje, ¿verdad? Y es importante que nosotros compartimos esas cifras, esa información que muestra nosotros somos la economía, ¿verdad? Entonces, that's why I think it's so incredibly important. And I repeat the numbers a lot to people. You know, when I say 30% of the state, 40%, people have heard it 1,000 times because repetition means that hopefully people will internalize that and will share that information, right? And so I think once faced with that, it's harder for people to argue. I will confess to both of you, politics are the least favorite part of my job. You know, most chambers really focus on advocacy and public policy. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I think government happens by miracle, frankly, at least from what I've seen. But I think that there are still people with common sense out there, legislators with common sense that understand that Latinos are good for Arizona. Latinos are good for the United States. You know, we have so much to contribute. And I think having a voice in that arena, a unified voice, with, you know, when we did that press conference most recently, it was with CPLC, it was with Lucha, it was with a lot of organizations, and we had a joint voice and a united front that represented many different perspectives. And so to me, that's one of the most important things we do, even though I dislike it. I dislike it simply because it is something that doesn't make sense to me many times, right? The obvious, you know, I feel is often overlooked. And so I think our role is really just, you know, providing information to legislators, to the population, so that we can tell our story.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. We need to control our narrative. Yes. So as we have new generation of leaders looking up for opportunities, what do you think, what would be the best advice for you to give as a person that is now leading one of the largest chambers in the country, and then also waiting or preparing for that leadership position?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I was at a meeting and a young woman, Latina, asked me, when do you stop being afraid? And I said, you don't.
You don't.
You never stop being afraid, but you learn to channel that into positive outlets, right? You learn to take that energy, that, you know, fear, and make it something productive. And so what I would say, you know, to my younger self or to, you know, the next generation is ánimo, like keep moving forward, even when it seems like everything's against you. And I get tired too, you know, being resilient all the time is exhausting, right? We shouldn't be defined by our ability to survive. Like at some point we should just, you know, be good and contribute. And so I think it's, you know, I get tired. I spoke to a group of women, and the group is led by Veronica Aguilar, and it's called Young and Empowered. And I was honored to be their first keynote. And I said, from the old and embattled to the young and empowered, let me tell you what we've learned, right? Like this is, I'm not doing you any favors here. What I'm handing off to you is, you know, what was given to me, and hopefully, you know, a little bit better. And now it's your turn. And so when, you know, we do that and we give each other our legacy and we become part of that combined legacy, I think that, it's a way to help each other. It's a way to open the door. It's a way to ease it. You know, if you use your voice now, another Latina down the road won't feel quieted. And that to me is the most important thing we can give the next generation.
Absolutely. You're right. You're right. You're right. We are always doing it for somebody else too. And if we think about, you know, what our role is right now, then certainly it helps others that come after us. So Fátima encontró una foto tuya en social media. So for those
stalker.
I like to do my research to get to know my guests. Just being a girl's girl, I saw the picture that was pinned, and it has something that goes on the finger. Let's just say
very shiny.
Very shiny.
And original.
He put a ring on it.
So tell us about that moment. You were sharing off camera what the everything that was happening around you.
Yeah.
And then this comes. Tell us about that. Share.
Yeah, no. So, it was a really interesting time in my life. I'm a single mom raising two boys, 12 and 14. And, they're really good at being 12 and 14. And so I have to constantly, kind of monitor. And I tell people I come to work just to feel competent because, I come to work and I'm like, I can make big decisions, right? I'm like, I talk to bank presidents. I talk to captains of industry. Like people pay me to talk and to share information. And then I would get home with my boys and I'd be, when they were little, I'd be like the blue sippy cup or the red sippy cup, the blue sippy cup or the red sippy cup. Like something's going to cause a meltdown and I want to make sure that it's not me. And so, nothing will make you question your competency more than having children. Yes. And so
that's so interesting. Like children being your biggest battles. Like, but I think that just shows how powerful it is, being a mother, like it's a big job.
I will tell you, when people ask, what is your biggest achievement in your career? I will say having children is the single best decision I ever made for my career. I hadn't really planned on having children. I had children, later in life. And I learned my negotiation skills. I learned patience. Yeah. I learned so many things that are good in business, right? Prioritizing, de-escalating situations, all of those
rephrasing.
Things. Yes. Reframing, rephrasing, right? Storming and norming, like all of that stuff, made me better at my career. And so, I'm coming into it from that perspective, certainly experiencing mommy guilt, experiencing all those. And so now my boys are a little bit older and they're grateful that I go to work, right? And so during the pandemic, they were like, when are you going back to work? And I was like, when are you going back to school more importantly, right? Because I'm really bad at 5th grade math, apparently. I learned that during the pandemic. But
I think we all learned that with the show, Are You Smarter Than a 5th Grader?
Yes.
I absolutely did.
That's a good point, right? It was, and this new math that doesn't, exactly. So anyway, that just set some context. And, I met Scott in the course of my, work and we were friends and pretty soon, my dearest friend Mari Rabago and I, said we have to stop being each other's plus ones because people are going to start to talk, We took each other to everything. I was like, oh, do you have to go to this? Okay, you're coming with me and I have to go to this. And we were always, so we said we have to, shake it up a little bit. I said, I wish I were that lucky, but, I'm not. So I'm going to have to find a better solution. But so Scott and I got together and, dated for 2 or 3 years at the time. When he proposed, was during a time that I was privileged to have the governor have selected me to co-chair. Governor Hobbs selected me to co-chair her transition committee. And it was a lot of work. It was like jury duty on steroids, okay? I should be excused from jury duty, frankly, for the rest of my life. Yes. If Governor Hobbs is listening, I just, little request there.
Just putting it out there.
Yes. And, we had to fill 30 state director positions in less than a month. And we were doing interviews. Thank God our office was closed at the Arizona Hispanic Chamber. Our office was closed. It was right during the holidays. And the week between Christmas and New Year's, Scott said, listen, I know you've been working so hard. Can I please take you to dinner? And I was like, I think I can squeeze you in. I mean, I'm going to try my best, right? It was like a Tuesday, I think, or a Wednesday. And, And we went to dinner and, there's so many things going on in my head about what I needed to do. And I'm talking to him and whatnot. And I'm not noticing all the cues, right? I'm not noticing that he's a little bit more nervous than usual. I didn't even notice the package that he brought into the restaurant with him, right? Completely like oblivious, right? I didn't notice, it was a member restaurant and their friends. I didn't notice that everybody kept looking at us the whole time. And I'm like, none of that. Later, I realized it, but at the time, I was so in my head, and all of a sudden, I'm almost, I think halfway into my salad, and I turn around, and he's on his, bended knee next to me, and I'm like, did he fall? Like what? Like again, completely clueless, and he's asking the question, and in my head, like a million different things are going on. And I remember my first reaction was, now? You want to do this now? Like, I'm not ready for this. I didn't get my hair done. My nails look horrible. Like, I don't even know what I'm wearing. Like, what? Like, I was so...
She looked great, by the way. Her outfit was matching her ring.
I was so unprepared for it, right? And thank God he is the most patient man on the planet. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me and he let me catch up, right? He let me spin a little bit. And then it got up and I was like, yes, of course, and we hugged and then the restaurant clapped and, the waiter came over, the chef came over with a bottle of champagne. And I'm like, you all knew?
It was planned.
How in the world? How did I miss this? And so, it's exciting. And we have these great, él es americano. Entonces, las diferencias en cultura son profundo.
Sí.
And it's been great learning each other, and just understanding each other's perspective. And it's really funny because I think that sometimes people talk about white privilege all the time, right? And he's, white male and, for all intents and purposes, everyone would think all of the privilege in the world and, didn't grow up in a bad neighborhood, grew up in, what looks like Norman Rockwell painting and, the whole thing. And he expects me to succeed. He extends his privilege to me in a way that I've never experienced before. And I've talked to girlfriends because I think it's very controversial. I remember getting backlash from people in the community, not a lot, but a few people that were like, you should be dating a Latino. I'm like, excuse me, that's none of your business.
Exactly.
Right?
That is your choice.
Like, been there, done that. Didn't work out so well. I'm moving on, right? And so, just learning those differences and the way that for him, he's not intimidated at all by my success or the things that I do. He's very supportive and he's incredibly proud and he expects it. And I think one of the things that kills particularly children in our society is low expectations, right? And when you've been someone that, has been sort of fighting low expectations their entire life, and suddenly you start to expect high expectations, guess what? Good things happen, right? All of a sudden, that person starts to exceed those expectations. And so, I always say he makes me better. But it is a challenge when we, again, just cultural differences. We have a multi-generational household. My mother lives with us. My children were a blended family. And so little things, I think I was mentioning earlier, my mother was saying, Scott, what do you think about this, how it's moving? And should the picture be a little more to the side? And Scott is very, very analytical. And he'll be like, well, let me see, Juanita. Let me go get the measuring tape. Let me pull it out. And he's measuring the wall and he's making calculations and the whole thing. And my mother's just sitting there like this looking at him. And I have to be like, honey, that wasn't a question. He's like, what do you mean? She asked me. And I'm like, no, it's not a question. It's never a question. My mother's never asked a question in her life, And so trying to translate that and watching those differences, have really been, enjoyable, frankly, and a little comedy relief for a very busy life. And, I think we talk about balance, and that to me is just a myth.
It is. And it's only asked to men. And there is no such thing. There are some days that you're better at something and then you're the worst at the other, or at least you feel that way. And then there are other days, but magically for a moment, they're both in sync, but then there is not really such thing.
No, there's no, I wish that society would stop, especially telling women that you can balance it. A good friend of mine said, you can have it all. You just can't have it all at the same time. And I think that's so true, right? It's, you learn how to prioritize and you learn to focus. And, I live 1 hour at a time. And, if this hour is at my son's play at school, then I'm there for that hour. I'm present, right? I'm not anywhere else, which for someone who is ADD is really, I'm like school, right? Or grocery list so, it's practice. It's an action and you have to be present. And, when I'm at a meeting at work and I'm talking about the work that we do at the chamber, I'm present, this hour I am with you and I'm present here. And maybe I'm thinking about a couple of other things, but for the most part, I'm here. And so I think that, letting women bring their ability to multitask to the workforce and stop trying to measure ourselves by, men's standards, right? And so men are really good at A to B. Right? We're really good at A to Z to N to U, so it's a different skill set. Yeah. It's a different competency and it's undervalued so much in the workforce. And so I think you have to bring that to the table as well.
You're right. And it's important to bring that perspective and then remind ourselves of that value as well that maybe others are blind to at certain moments. I do want to share, hace unas semanas tuve la oportunidad de ir a un photo shoot, donde próximamente va a salir la revista.
Salió hoy.
Salió hoy.
Sí, hoy mismo.
Entonces, Mónica sale en la portada como una de las latinas más influyentes del estado. Pero al photo shoot llevaste a tu mamá. Y estando en la preparación, estábamos, yo estaba acompañando a Alicia, que también estuvo en la portada, y estaban otras hermosas mujeres y muy capaces que estaban ahí también. Tenías a un miembro de tu equipo allí también contigo. Se me hizo un momento tan hermoso porque creo que estuvimos en comunidad. Todas compartiendo. Sí estaba un nombre, pero se salió la mayoría de partes, puedo decir todas.
Sí.
Pero esa manera tan natural de empezar a contribuir y a compartir, ¿no? Ya sea a tu mamá siendo parte del grupo inmediatamente, conversar y abrazar en la conversación entre todas como si ya teníamos mucho tiempo de conocernos. En ese espacio. Sí. Y la otra era de la apertura que tú tuviste y también que le permitiste a tu staff de compartir de esa manera también, ¿no? Like, let's get a brainstorming session and let's figure out how to do this together because we're planning this and that. Oh, that's awesome. Y cómo la cultura que nos une a todas se sintió en ese momento because we were all sharing about our experiences and the events and how they reflect and the messaging, how they reflect and represent us. So I thought that was beautiful.
It was a wonderful moment. Eso es nuestro trabajo. That's our job, right? And finding ways to get new inspiration and new ideas and share different perspectives, that can happen anywhere. It can happen at the grocery store. It can happen at a photo shoot. It can happen in a staff meeting. And you have to not just look for those opportunities, but make those opportunities. And I was really fortunate. I believe that my favorite writer, Paulo Coelho, who wrote The Alchemist, right, says, when you're on the right path, the universe conspires in your favor. And so the day before that shoot, we had a staff team building session, and we did vision boards. And Briseida, who is on our staff, on her board said, one day I want to be on the cover of a business magazine.
Wow.
there's no way I would have known it unless we were doing this specific activity the day before. And I said, Briseida, I want you to come with me tomorrow. I'm going to be on the cover of a business magazine, and I want you to talk it into existence. I want you to be there. And it's funny because that magazine dropped today, and I showed it to her, and I said, I want you to, on your vision board, Photoshop your face on mine or, wherever, or Photoshop it into the photograph on the cover, because that's your destiny. And it was just a great opportunity to be able to do that. With my mother, I often feel like sometimes she doesn't fully understand the work that I do. She doesn't understand what keeps me away from home sometimes and why I have to do those things. And so I try to bring her in to show her as much as I can, right? And so at the Datos event, she comes with me to the Datos event, right? And I'm like, this is why, because she's a part of that. She allows me to keep, to put my children in her care for those hour, 2 hours, whatever, that I need to do something. So she's as much a part of Datos, as much a part of that photo shoot as I am, because she helps me manifest that. And so it was important for me to bring both of them. Now, the other thing is, as soon as she sees hair and makeup, she's like, I'm going with you, whatever it is. And so she was just as ready for that photo shoot. Just in case someone didn't show up, she was going to, jump in there and be ready to go.
She's very diva. She loves glam.
She loves the glam. She's a very classy person, and she was a first grade teacher for 30 years. And so she has this presence about her and this look that I've never quite mastered. But, it's fascinating to me because, she takes pride in it too. And, our song has always been Wind Beneath My Wings. And, one's the hero and one's in the shadow. And I remember talking to her about this song, and I'm like, Mom, you're my hero. I'm the shadow. And she's like, no, you're the hero. I'm the shadow. And I was like, oh my gosh, the different perspective that you have kind of going into this. And, I remember being, like I said, the consentida as a child and a little bratty, frankly, and in high school and, also at that age where all the hormones are coming. And I remember saying to her one time, Mommy, you never tell me that I'm pretty. Other people tell me that I'm pretty, but you never tell me that I'm pretty. And she looks at me and she goes, I told you you were smart. And I went, whoa, all right, that's good too. That's good too. That works, But she is a part of everything I do. She is, she always says, I don't want you to make my same mistakes. And I'm like, I will make those same mistakes, but I will make them faster and get over them because I've seen it, right? And so the good stuff and the bad stuff. And so it works out very well. But all of that to say that there was this moment, and this situation where we're all waiting in this photo shoot and this beautiful, magical collaboration happens, right? We're talking about an event that we host that's a really big deal that the whole community is a part of. And these ideas started flying. And I hope, having been there, that you see some of those ideas realized at the event because they were great ideas. And I thought, we should do more of this. Yeah. This should be a community event, not just when we get there, but before. Let's put out on social media, give us your ideas. Here's the theme, or here are some choices on the theme. What do you think? And what are some ideas? And it was this, incredible, just dynamic interaction that was so organic and so real. And just, to me, es nuestra cultura.
Exacto.
That's what we do. And that little microcosm of what happened is what we can do in the state. It's what we can do in the country, given the opportunity.
Tienes mucha razón. And it's so beautiful to be in the space. It's always such a pleasure and honor to learn from you and hear you speak and share our story and be the advocate that you continue to be. I think that's all that we have for today. But again, thank you for giving us this hour and being present here with us, because we know you have a lot more. And in your mind, you're already thinking about the 1,000 that comes right after this recording. So thank you for sharing your
Thank you
insight.
so much. Thank you for having this platform so that we can all share from each other and lift each other up. I think this is beautiful. And I love that we're able to share space and energy. And I'm just so honored to have been in your dynamic. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm excited to see your wedding on April 2nd. And your vacation.
Me too. I'm going to try to be better prepared this time.
We're gonna see all those pictures.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time. Empodérate de Chicanos por la Causa.